Hello and welcome to Dream Alchemist TV. My name is Karen Asempa and today we have on the happiness speaker. Her name is Frederika Roberts. Now, I had to have Frederika on this show. I did actually see Frederika speak, I would say, was it maybe March or around about that time? And you blew me away, Frederika, and I thought your story was one that needed to be shared. So can I just ask you to start your story, because where does your story begin?
Hello, Karen. Thanks very much for having me on as well. And for a lovely introduction. Well, where does my story begin? I think it begins really when I became a parent, because like every parent-to-be, I was looking forward with some trepidation to this baby arriving. And when my daughter Charlie was born, suddenly things started going horribly wrong. I was planning this really natural birth and all of this and the best plans, and
Yeah.
As it happened, I ended up with an emergency cesarean section, and when she was born, she was immediately whisked away to intensive care, to pediatric intensive care, because she was actually quite blue and they thought there'd be something wrong with her heart. So I gave birth at 10:30 at night. I'd had a cesarean, so I couldn't go anywhere. And at 5:30 in the morning, they whisked the travel incubator past my bed and said, "We're taking your daughter to Leeds now." I live in Doncaster in the UK, so that's 30 miles away roughly, which isn't that much. But when you can't go with her, it's horrible. And this was before smartphones or anything. And the midwife just left me with a Polaroid of my baby. And off she went to a different hospital, and it was just a horrible, horrible way to experience parenthood for the first time.
Yeah.
So I suppose that's really the start of it.
Yeah, that must have been so scary. I have a goddaughter who was born at 23 weeks, and I remember going to see her a few days old, and it was awful. Just so, I just couldn't believe it. So I can't imagine what that must have been like as a mother,
Yeah,
to go through that.
it was, and of course it was. I was going through it. My husband was going through it as well, and he was torn between me in one hospital and our daughter in another. He actually had the first of many of both of our birthdays that were spent in hospital over the years. So he had his birthday when Charlie was 2 days old, going between one hospital and the other. And she did come back to Doncaster after a couple of days, and she came back with a diagnosis of multiple congenital heart defects. So lots and lots of things wrong with her heart. And over the coming days, she kept having these really erratic heart rates. It was so scary. It was going up to 260, 270 beats a minute. And that was just one of the problems she was having with her heart in terms of irregularities. So that was then controlled with medication. And then eventually we all went back to Leeds to a cardiac unit where we spent a couple of weeks while they kind of decided what to do with her. But then she came home, and life for the most part was quite normal with Charlie. She was very blue. She had quite fetching sort of, oh, bless you.
Yeah.
Fetching, I'm going to be doing the same as well. I've got hay fever and it's that time of day, isn't it? It kicks in. So she had quite turquoise nail beds and quite purple lips, so we used to joke that we had to be quite careful what clothes we put her in because not everything was very flattering.
Yeah.
And she actually ended up having open heart surgery when she was nearly 5 years old, just before she started school.
Yeah.
In the meantime, we actually had a second daughter, and when I was pregnant, halfway through my pregnancy, we were referred automatically for a detailed heart scan, obviously, as we already had one child with a heart condition. And the blows just kept on coming, really, because with Hannah, we were told at that particular scan that there wasn't really an awful lot they could do for her, that there was nobody alive in the world at that point with her condition over the age of 20. She was missing the pulmonary artery, so the main artery linking the heart to the lungs. So her condition wasn't just a heart condition, it was actually a heart and lung condition. And they actually advised us to have a termination at that point.
Oh, can I just ask, how old was Charlie at the time?
Charlie
Wow.
would have been around about 18 months, so she was 23 months old when Hannah was born, so we did go ahead with the pregnancy.
Yeah.
And that was a big consideration because we were thinking about what will it be like if we bring a sister into Charlie's life, and Charlie has grown up knowing that she has a heart condition, and then she has this sister with a heart condition who potentially dies very early on. How
Mm.
will that affect Charlie and her thought about, well, will I die as well? So there was a lot to consider, and it was a horrible, horrible time, and not something you want to really go through when you're halfway through the pregnancy. But once we've made the decision and we've gone to a different hospital, we'd found a fantastic surgeon, thanks to my mum actually, who had sort of knew another surgeon, and people kind of talk to each other. And we went to Birmingham Children's Hospital, and they still told us the prognosis was really bleak, but they were willing to try. And once we'd made that decision, for me it was a case of, right, well, she's safe while I'm pregnant. Whatever happens afterwards, I
Yeah.
will enjoy every day of this pregnancy. And I really, really did. I had a fantastic pregnancy, much better than I did with Charlie. I was up and down painting our new house, and all of this kind of stuff, and just really enjoying the pregnancy because I didn't know what was going to happen after that. So,
How,
and I suppose.
sorry for cutting you off, but how do you work through that, Frederica? Because that seems like, well, it is. It's one blow after another. So how did you cope with that at the time? Because personally, I don't know how I would have dealt with that.
Well, I think it's one of those things I always used to say to people where you just do what you have to do, and to some extent that's true. At times it is just put one foot in front of the other, just get through another day, and when things are really tough, that's kind of all you can do at times. But
Mm.
for me and for Simon, my husband, it came as a very early realization that we did actually have a choice, and we could be really miserable about what fate had dealt us, if you will, or we could just do the best with what we had. And we had two amazing daughters, and whatever we were given, however many days or years we got with each of them, we were going to make the most of those. We were going to give them a happy childhood, a happy life, and we were going to just enjoy life as we would have done if they'd had nothing wrong with them. And
Mm.
that's kind of how I cope through a lot of the traumas. I have kind of a little mental shelf, so when I have to worry, I worry. At the moment, we're waiting for. We're told that Hannah will need open heart surgery again in the next 18 months to 2 years, and that's a really scary time. But I know it's there, and when it happens, I'll be really, really worried and scared, and we'll go kind of into hospital mode. But in the meantime, it's life as normal, and when she's a little pest, she still absolutely does my head in like any teenager would, and life is just what it is. So it's kind of compartmentalizing as well.
So when the doctor said to you for Hannah that it probably would be best that you had a termination, how did you take that news? Was it something that you had considered, or were considering, or how did it feel when the doctor said that to you? Then
It was
um,
terrifying. It was absolutely terrifying, and I was really angry. That there's this whole, why us again? Why haven't we suffered enough as a family? We've been through this before. Why are we having to go through this again? And yes, we did consider the termination. We got scarily, scarily close, actually,
mhm.
to the point where literally I had a glass of water in one hand and a tablet in another. And it is really horrifying when I think how close we got. But Hannah had always been, I think she's always been a little fighter, and she was obviously determined to be here one way or another. She actually very nearly died when she was 10 days old. She got a cold and she got bronchitis, and she stopped breathing and her heart stopped when she was in my arms at home, and the midwife just turned up at the right moment. So again, and she fought every step of the way, and she kind of goes through life like that. She's a lovely, lovely person, but she is a proper little fighter, and we've seen that with the teenage hormones and everything. And every time I've wanted to kind of throttle her, I've reminded myself that we're so lucky to be in the situation to have a teenager we want to throttle, and that it's just normal. This will pass, you know. And what a lovely thing to actually be in that position, to really have normal teenage horrible days when you just kind of think, oh my goodness, how can I get through this? So yeah, but all those emotions go through you know, anger, fear, frustration, all of that. But for me, you know, that I suppose that's why I'm happy and why I do what I do, because I've never hung on to those feelings for too long, because they are destructive feelings, and if you hang on to them for a very long time, you just get bitter and you don't enjoy life. And I want to enjoy life, and I want my children to enjoy life. So.
Now, you haven't always been the happiness speaker, have you?
No.
So when you were having your daughters and everything else, what was your job then? Because I know you haven't always been the happiness speaker.
No. Well, between Charlie and Hannah, I just did bits and pieces, and I did a little bit of freelance teaching with Italian for Business, because I'm actually Italian and German. When I had Hannah, I eventually decided to go back to what I'd trained to do, which was teaching. And I had a decision to make about which year I would go back into teaching, because teaching is a September intake. And so I thought, well, I can either do it when she's 10 months old, or I can do it when she's a year and 10 months old. And I decided to go for the former, because I wasn't very good at being at home all the time. I didn't think it was making me a great mum, really. So and at this point, we were actually waiting for a date for her to have open heart surgery. And I got my first teaching job. I'd qualified years beforehand, but this was my first proper teaching job. And I'd been in the job 2 days when I got a call from the hospital saying, can you come in next week for Hannah to have her surgery? So
wow.
I had 6 weeks off in my very first term of teaching, which didn't help the whole classroom discipline.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah, working school, so I know what you mean.
So that's what I was doing at the time, and I did that for a couple of years, and then I decided that teaching really wasn't for me. I'm probably not the most patient of people. I'm okay with my own kids, and I've been okay when I've gone into schools and done stuff that wasn't teaching, but teaching is a very, very different category in its own right. And I went into recruitment, and for the best part of the last 12 years, until December last year, I was in recruitment, mostly in specialist recruitment, and the last 2 years of those in a firm that I then eventually ended up buying shares in and being joint MD of and 50% shareholder of. While that was happening, I ended up starting a social media marketing business, because I was doing a lot of that in my recruitment business. And somehow, amongst all of this, because I was doing a lot of training, the speaking kind of started coming to the surface. So just over a year ago, about May last year, I joined the Professional Speaking Association, and that's really where the happiness speaker was born.
Because you've written a book as well about happiness, haven't you?
I have indeed, and you know, I'm so prepared. I should be a girl guide, shouldn't I? Here it is, Recipe for Happiness. I'll hold it
up for a little bit longer, because we couldn't see it there. So hold it up for a bit longer.
So, Recipe for Happiness, and it's 9 essential ingredients for a happy life. And it's broken into 9 chapters, which break down some of the key. I refer everything to food. I love food. I'm a proper Italian. I love cooking. So the 9 key ingredients, the 9 things that you can do that really will contribute to your happiness. And each chapter also has, at the end of it, one of my favourite recipes, most of them being Italian recipes. Some of them are really emotional recipes that are connected to my grandmother and that kind of thing. And each chapter also has some short activities that the reader can do to start putting into practice what they've read about as well.
So what is the recipe for happiness? Because I remember at the beginning of this year, you saw everything on Twitter, on television. It was always happiness, happiness, happiness. You know, you do this for happiness. Everyone was on happiness. So you said you've got 9 recipes in there. Could you share some of your recipes for happiness?
Yeah, some of the ingredients are actually, I say I've got 9, but really it's 10 because there's one that kind of sits in a category of its own. So rather than give it its own chapter, I've mentioned it in a couple of chapters. And that one's probably the key ingredient, and it's gratitude. And I know a lot of people talk about gratitude, but it really is so vital to happiness. I keep a gratitude journal. It's something that I actually started doing only quite recently as I started researching happiness and positive psychology rather than just going on my own experiences. And to me, the whole thing, again, I've got it here because it's so beautiful. I'm a bit of a stationery addict, and look at this. Isn't it beautiful?
Oh, that is gorgeous.
And I'm an Aquarian as well, and I thought it looked a bit like a kind of mermaid on here. So, you can see it's full of scrawls. It's just loads and loads, and it takes no time at all. So I write in there every morning. My goal is 3 gratitudes every day. I usually write 2 or 3 pages of just stream of consciousness, whatever I'm thinking of that's been good in the last 24 hours that I'm looking forward to that day. And it could be anything from a cuddle from one of my daughters to a client meeting that's gone really well, or being really grateful for health and life in general. It depends how fundamental I'm feeling at the time. But it sets you up for the day, and it stops you focusing on the negatives, because we filter out about 99% of everything that our brain perceives at any given time without us even being aware of it. So if we focus in on negatives, then that's what we'll see, and everything else will get filtered out. So I'd much rather focus on the good stuff and have the negatives filtered out. So that's one key ingredient. I talk a lot about the little happiness ingredients as well. So that's kind of like a big category of ingredients, but it's making time and doing the things that make your heart sing. It's doing the stuff that makes you feel good.
Yes, that is so important. Call it the feel-good factor.
Exactly. And we all do things, don't we? It could be singing at the top of your voice when nobody's listening, or dancing in your living room, or having a lovely hot bath with candles all around you. I can't remember the last time I did that. I used to just get one of the kids coming and going, "Are you having a nice time?" Yes, I was. Thank you. I kind of went out the window with parenthood, but there's so many little things to just spending a bit of time reading a book, or even just sometimes being a real sort of slob in front of the telly and saying, for an hour I'm going to do nothing and just sit and watch something I enjoy, or spending time with your friends. And for me, one of them is live music. So last night I went and watched Blondie in Sheffield, which was just amazing.
I love Blondie. I can't believe she was on.
I know. She was at Glastonbury a couple of nights ago, wasn't she? And then, Sheffield, and it was a tiny, tiny venue. It was the O2 Academy. So it was standing only, and we were so close. You could properly see just how amazing she still looks. And it was fantastic. So it's all of those little things. And some things take a bit more planning, a bit more money, a bit more time, and others are really, really quick. So that's a really important thing to make sure that no matter how busy we are in life, we still do these little things that make us feel good.
Do we have to spend money to have happiness, would you say, or to create those magic moments for ourselves? Those moments to make our heart sing?
I don't think you have to spend money. I think there are things that you can do with money. And certainly when you look at a lot of the stuff that's been written up in terms of psychology and positive psychology about does money buy happiness, the answer generally is no, money doesn't. Experiences do, however. So if you have the money for great experiences, of course that's fantastic. But it costs no money, does it, to just hug your child, or to say I love you to someone, or have somebody say that back to you, or to just sing or listen to music in the living room, or it's all those little things. Like if you're sitting in a traffic jam and you're going to be late, you can get really wound up about it, and it's so easy to do, and I still catch myself doing it, and I have to give myself a talking to, I'm going to be late, and before you know it, everything, the shoulders are up here, and you're really tense. Or you can just think, you know what, I'm stuck in this traffic jam, turn the music up, sing along, and just take advantage of a moment you weren't going to have. if you've got to where you were going on time, and you just enjoy that moment, and that costs nothing to do. So you don't have to have money to enjoy those moments. No.
Music, you mentioned music, and music is something which is big in my life. I hardly watch TV. I listen to a lot of music, and on my Twitter, I don't know if you've noticed, but Mondays I send out a feel good factor song in the morning and one on the night time, something to get you going, because I feel music, just once you get it either in your physicality, you start moving and dancing, it makes you feel so much happier. And I write a gratitude journal also, and in my book it's always to be grateful for the great music that's out there, because there's some amazing music that's out there that I love Brazilian music, samba, and that I really can get a dance onto. So it's things like that help lift my happiness. Because I don't know, like you, I believe happiness only happens in moments. We're not going to be happy all the time. So it's making the most of those moments. Do you agree? Or
I look at it slightly differently. I think of happiness as, I think the moment to me is what I would define as joy. Those moments of pure joy, elation, euphoria even sometimes. Whereas to me, happiness overall is actually a much deeper, more fundamental thing, which means that you're not on top of the world all the time. But I think of myself, of even when I'm going through some of the darkest times of my life, I still consider myself to be a happy person. That's why I talk about being fundamentally happy, because it's that kind of state of being that comes from your core that says, I have the inner resilience to overcome these things. And I know that with time, I'm going to find a way to bounce back. Sometimes you don't know at the time how it's going to happen, but that inner belief that with time I will bounce back and I will find a way to do that. So to me, that's what happiness is. So it's that kind of, contentment is not the right word really, because contentment assumes that you're happy with the status quo all the time, and I'm not. I'm always changing and striving to do more and achieve more, but it's a kind of inner sense of well-being, I suppose. And to me, those moments that you talk about, that's the sort of, the pinnacle, the joy, the elation, and the euphoria that you experience. If you can put more and more of those moments into your life, then it kind of bolsters that fundamental happiness. It's like a safety cushion, I look at it, so you don't fall quite so hard, maybe.
Well, you mentioned bouncing back, and this is something, I had a meeting this afternoon, and we were talking about depression. Now, I'm very lucky in my life. I can, if something, gets me down, I'm very good. I can bounce back, say 10 minutes, 20 minutes. Not every single person can do that. Do you have any tips for bouncing back? Because I know that's one of the hardest things. I think that bounce back, to be able to make that shift from the dark to the light, really, isn't it?
It is. I've actually been depressed at times in my life when I've actually ended up on medication for a period of time for it as well. So I do know how hard it can be to do that. I think carrying on to practice the gratitude even when you're at your darkest, trying to find something, no matter how small, that you can still be grateful for, just keeps that ticking over. And also, I know I'm not the most obvious proponent of exercise, but doing energetic things. Now, if you do want to exercise, that is known to be a really good way to combat depression, to bounce back. It gets endorphins into your system, and it might be the last thing you feel like doing, but if you even just take yourself for a walk, it helps. And if you do that regularly. But even just doing things that are energetic, even if it's not what you would class as exercise, just getting yourself moving. So if you're so depressed, you can do lie in bed, and just get yourself out of bed, wash, and get into a different part of the house, doing something, just moving around. It's taking those tiny little steps sometimes. And something that I've done quite often is I actually talk to myself, and I know it sounds a bit daft, but when I'm really, really down, I give myself a talking to, and it's literally, come on, Fred, you can't stay like this forever. You know, what's the alternative here? You're going to have to, at some point, pull yourself out. So what can you do right now? Think back to all the things you know you can do. Get yourself moving and just do something, and stop thinking about what's making you feel depressed in the first place. Think about something else. Take yourself to see a film or something. Even if it's sometimes forcing yourself to watch comedy or something, you know, anything that just kind of breaks the cycle a little bit. And it's not an instant fix, but if you do enough of it, it really does help.
Yeah, yeah. It's that thing, I think, as well, what you said, and I don't know if it is for. I know depression's not a choice, because who would want to choose to be that way? But I suppose in that moment, it's that choice to say to yourself, even though you know it's going to be really tough, that I have to make that effort to get out of bed, or to shower, like you were saying, or you know, at the time it may be the hardest thing, but knowing that there is a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel. It might not be the great big spotlight that you were looking for, but that it is there. That maybe that you can try that. I think what also that you mentioned, it is that shift in your physicality. Now I know if I'm feeling tired and I think, gosh, I need some energy, put some music on and I start having a dance, and that lifts me, because sometimes I think, oh gosh, you know, it's like that. I go to the gym early in the morning. Some mornings I wake up and think, oh, I can't be bothered today. But I know that if I just get up, I have to throw myself out of bed sometimes. But if I do that, then I'll be okay. You know, I'll get there in the end. So we've got gratitude as one of your ingredients, and what was the other one that you just said? Sorry.
The little happiness ingredients are doing the stuff that makes your heart sing. Yeah.
Yes, make your heart sing. Please share more.
So yeah, energy we talked about as well, of course, and I think sometimes it's having a certain amount of acceptance as well. You know, that stuff does happen in life, and I think if we have an expectation that everything will always be wonderful, we're only setting ourselves up for a fall, really, because everything is not always wonderful. And there are things you can change, and if you can change it and you're not happy with it, then change it, and don't just expect it to go away. You know, accept that you have to work at that change. If you're not happy in your job, then change your job. It might take 2 years, but you know, you can take steps towards that, get different training, you can, you know, start applying for jobs and that kind of thing. And then there are things that happen that you can't change. I can't change the fact that my daughters have got heart conditions. People can't change the fact that perhaps they or their loved ones get ill, and we can't change the fact that people in our lives that we love die. You know, it's a fact of life that these things will happen, and we cannot change it. So I think at that point, it's having a certain amount of acceptance that there will be a period of grief or a period of mourning for either the situation that's changed in a way that we don't want, or the person that we've lost, and accept that that's a normal part of what happens to us, and that we have to deal with that and allow ourselves to deal with that. And then again, accept that at some point we have to move on, and we have to kind of put all of these things in place. So acceptance, I think, is a really important factor as well.
Yeah, it is. Sometimes it's really hard, though, isn't it, to accept that the circumstance or the situation that you are in at the time, it can be really tough.
It is.
Yeah. Sorry, go on, carry on.
So let's think. I'm trying to scan up. I think what's really important is asking people for help.
Sorry, we missed that.
Asking people for help.
Yeah.
And actually, the flip side of that is helping others, which has been shown through a lot of research that's been done to actually make us feel happier. So doing things for other people. I actually wrote an article not so long ago saying giving to charity is a selfish activity, because it actually makes us feel good. And so helping other people is a great way to actually help ourselves. But asking people for help, and we're not good at that. We're not good at that at all in general as human beings. and it's a learned skill. It's something that as toddlers and babies we do because we're completely reliant on other people, and then as we grow up, we kind of forget to ask for help, and that there are others out there who can help us. And when I was writing my book, I asked quite a few people, what's stopping me from asking for help? And a lot of the answers that were coming back were around shame and embarrassment, pride, feeling that we should be able to do it ourselves, fear sometimes if it's at work. People are afraid to ask for help because they might be seen as incompetent at their job. All of these things kind of collide to stop us from doing something really simple, which if you're managing people, asking for help could be simply delegating tasks to others, which in turn means that you're empowering them to do a better job and you're developing their skills, so you're actually helping them. It could be asking friends and family to help and support you through difficult times. Sometimes it's financial, sometimes it's emotional, but just kind of saying, I need a little bit of support with this. And so that's kind of, and then that ties back into gratitude, because if people have helped you, you can be grateful for that, and you can express that gratitude and say thank you, and it all kind of feeds into the same cycle. I'm still not great at asking for help, I'll be honest. I'm that person, if you go shopping and you're on your own and you're trying to put a million things into your bags and you say, would you like any help with your packing? And I always say no. It's automatic. No, I'm fine. And then I'm thinking, why did I say no? Because actually I've got stuff coming down the conveyor belt faster than I can deal with it,
Yeah.
So it's kind of reprogramming yourself to actually say, oh yes, actually some help would be really lovely, thank you.
Exactly, because what does it mean if we do accept that help? So, a gentleman when I was in Edinburgh the other day asked, I got in my suitcase and he said, would you like me to carry your bag up? And I was like, yeah. Yeah.
Good girl.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I would have said, no, I can handle it, while I struggled up all the stairs with my bag, but I thought, yeah, please, gosh, I'd love you to help me, why not?
Yeah,
it was handsome.
And actually,
that always helps.
I think if you realise that it's not a weakness, but actually a strength to ask for help, it completely changes your perception of it, and that you're strong enough to think, yeah, I can do this, it's fine, and you just ask. And I've had a lot of help over the years, help that I've asked for and help that I haven't asked for. And certainly a lot of the things that we have gone through with the girls, we couldn't have done without help and support from friends and family, from the shoulder to cry on to the very, very practical help and support of what you do when you're stuck in a hospital 24 hours a day. People actually bringing you food and bringing you books to read, and sometimes just coming and sitting with your kids so that you can leave the hospital ward and get some fresh air. All of that kind of thing. So it's a little bit for help.
And I suppose as yourself, and I love being able to do things for people.
Yeah.
I love to see people succeed. I love to see them have success in their life, and if I can help along with that along the way, then it makes you proud, doesn't it? It's like, oh,
exactly.
They're your babies, really, doesn't it?
Exactly. So why deny people that joy of helping?
Do you think it's part of allowing yourself to be vulnerable?
Yes, absolutely. And I think vulnerability is a big factor in happiness as well. I'm a big fan of the American researcher Brene Brown, and she's written about vulnerability. And it really, if you don't allow yourself to be vulnerable, then you don't open yourself up to possibilities. And that's in anything in life, whether it's the vulnerabilities of, as in my case, becoming a parent, because it is a vulnerability, it's scary. If you don't do it, then that's one avenue that goes on. If you have one bad relationship in life and you decide that therefore you'll never make yourself vulnerable again, and I know we've had a conversation offline about that, but you decide that's it, men, women, whatever, that's it for me, so I'll never trust anybody, I'll never let anyone in again because it makes me vulnerable. Then how do you actually experience all the joy that comes with being in a relationship and trusting somebody? And if you're thinking about your career, if you don't allow yourself to be vulnerable, for example, with something as basic as going for a job interview, it's a vulnerable position to be in. But if you don't do that, you're not going to get the job you want. You know, if you want to run your own business, you're going to be vulnerable because you're going to get security behind it. So all of those things lead into vulnerability.
Would you say as well, maybe it's rejection? It's being vulnerable against rejection because nobody likes to be rejected. I put myself in a business where, in the entertainment business, which I also work in, where I'm rejected all the time. So I'm actually used to that rejection now, you know, but it's never hurt me, or because I know there's always different factors. It's not, you know, the factor where sometimes when I'm a dancer, whether I wasn't a good enough dancer, or now that I act, that I'm not, you know, a good enough actor. I knew the other day when I walked into a meeting, the character that I was going for, there was a girl sat there. She was perfect. She didn't even have to open her mouth. How she looked, she was perfect. I knew as soon as I walked in there that I wasn't going to get that job. So that was, you know, another part of rejection. Maybe before I would have thought, oh gosh, it's because of me, how I act, you know. But it really, in the bigger picture of things, she just fitted the character, the name of the character, and everything else that was going for it. So normally that rejection isn't because of our own stuff, what we think. Maybe sometimes of, I am not worthy of your help. I am not worthy of your kindness. Maybe as a performer, I am really not worthy of that job or that role, because you doubt yourself so much. So I'd say we hold ourselves back a lot, don't we, from something simple as not being able to ask for help.
Absolutely, and we are our own worst enemies. I don't know who said it, but the phrase "get out of your own way" sometimes, you know, and we do have to get out of our own way sometimes and actually allow ourselves to be vulnerable, to ask for help, and all of those things. And if rejection comes, and that's part of one of those things that you then have to kind of move on from, you know, and sometimes you can learn from that as well. You know, as I say, there are situations where you're just not the right person for that job or whatever. There are situations where perhaps you could have handled things differently in a job interview, for example, or that kind of thing. And you can come away from that rejection and think, oh, I'm not worthy and this is horrible and I'll never get a job. Or you can think, well, okay, let's look at that. You know, is there a better way to answer this type of question? Have I not researched the company well enough, or whatever? You know, there are learning experiences you can take from rejection as well sometimes. So you can turn that on its head as a positive as well.
And I suppose sometimes it's the terms and conditions we give to that situation. So I'll say every meeting, casting that I used to go for, I'd get 1 out of 3, always. This year it's been 1 out of 6. And somebody said to me, well, maybe, because I said, gosh, it was always, you know, 1 out of 3. Out of my 6th one, you know, I've been filming. And a friend said, well, maybe it's just changed to 1 out of 6 now. And I thought, yeah, you're right. Who always said it was going to be 1 out of 3? Just by chance, at the time, that's how it happened. And when I got to the 3rd one, I thought, well, what's going on? And, you know, this one I'm supposed to get because I've always got that. And I labelled it and I give it a term and a condition. And it wasn't meant to be that way. It was 1 out of 6. But I suppose the thing is as well, the more doors you knock on, the more opportunities you create for yourself as well.
Exactly. Opening yourself up to that, isn't it? And being open to the fact that it's not always going to work out the way you hoped, but if you keep knocking on those doors, then things will happen. And that's whether it's career opportunities, whether it's relationships, you know, if you just keep opening yourself up to opportunities. And that's actually the really interesting thing, is that people who are happier feel that they are luckier than people who are unhappy, even though they're actually not in specific terms. If you take it that, you know, there is no such thing as luck, because you actually make your own luck. But people who are happier feel luckier, and they do spot more opportunities. They simply have their eyes wider open to the opportunities that are out there. So actually, again, everything seems to go in these circles and cycles, doesn't it? Because if you're happy, you spot more opportunities. You spot more opportunities, and you think you're lucky. So you're just going to jump in. You're not going to be afraid of that vulnerability. By doing that, of course, you achieve more success. Things happen for you that wouldn't otherwise happen. And then that kind of perpetuates the happiness and your belief that things go well for you and that you're a lucky person. And it just goes round and round and round. So the more you make yourself vulnerable, the more you take these steps towards happiness, the more things will go your way in life. So I think it's just a fascinating field, really, when you start looking into that psychology. And it's not just sort of how you feel as an intangible, but it's actually what happens when you do certain things that affects the hormones in your body, that then affect the chemistry of how you react to situations. So if you take, for example, asking for help and helping others, there's a hormone that's highly linked to trust, which is oxytocin. And oxytocin makes us then feel good. So if we put ourselves in situations where we open up to trusting people, where we have these mutually beneficial relationships, where we are vulnerable, but we kind of open ourselves up to that, then it releases oxytocin, and that makes us feel good. If we haven't got a child audience, oxytocin is also related to rather other relationship type activities. We can make ourselves vulnerable in all sorts of ways, but getting close to people is really important. And that's, I suppose, another happy thing, really, making sure that we have relationships, not just relationships, but relationships with connections, friendships,
We've lost you a bit there. I don't know what happened. I don't know if it's your microphone or something, but it was very, very blurred.
All right. So I'll try and put a really attractive headset on and see if that actually
helps. Maybe that would help, because I know it was something. You hear the word relationship and your ears are ding. Come on, we need to get into this one. Everyone wants to know about relationships. I get asked about them all the time myself. So we must catch up on that one. So it was echoing and bringing us backwards and forwards. So I don't know if it was. So if you could, when you're ready, go back to just what you were saying. No, that's fine. That might be better.
Is that better?
Yes.
Okay. So what was I saying about relationships? So I don't think it has actually.
This is what it's always like with Google Live on air. There's always some little technical, so don't worry about it.
Wonders of technology. I'm just going to have a quick look at the settings just so that I can with the headphones.
That's fine. That's fine. Going back to what we were saying, we're going to talk about relationships in a second, and I think a lot of people hold themselves back from relationships because of rejection. And with the coaching I do, I have so many clients that come to me, and we have to remember that relationships aren't just a relationship between, a couple that want to be together. Relationships are in our everyday world and our friendships as well. So when we hear the term relationship, it's not just with someone that's your potential suitor. It's your friendships as well, isn't it? And it's trusting in friendships also, and in work related and business also.
Exactly, it's human connection really, and that's the key. Whether that is in a romantic relationship, whether it's friendships, whether it's business connections, it's actually making that human connection, and that does require vulnerability. It does require putting yourself out there to actually open up to those connections. But if you do that, the benefits are vast, really.
So you're saying about trust. I think that's where we left off. Could you just explain what you were saying about trust?
Yeah, so basically the hormone oxytocin is linked to trust, and that kind of ties in. That's where we came to relationships. So if you put yourself in a position where you trust people and you allow them to trust you, so that can be in loving relationships, partnerships, it can be in business situations, it can be friendships, that actually elevates your levels of oxytocin, and that makes you feel better. So it's a real feel-good factor, and that's where I started talking about, oxytocin is also released during sex, for example, and enjoyment of sex. So it kind of links, it's a fantastic hormone. And the flip side of that is that on the other hand, you've got hormones such as cortisol, which are very much linked to stress and anxiety. And the more stressed and anxious you feel, the more cortisol you produce. And cortisol stays in your system a lot longer than oxytocin. So actually you have to put that little bit more effort and work into the trust and into relationships and into human contact, so that you can really boost that oxytocin. And that's a really important thing when you're thinking about working with other people and how you actually interact with people, the language that you use, the way, if you're managing people, that you give feedback, for example, as well, because and we know that we're both in a business, you as an actress and as a speaker, and me as a speaker, that people give you feedback and you ask for feedback so you can get better. But if that feedback is given in the wrong way, it can really spark completely the wrong reaction. And sometimes you think, well, why has that person completely overreacted to what I said? And it's because something you will have said will have tapped into that release of cortisol that gets the anxiety going. And because of that, their cortisol levels spike, and they're actually then completely overreacting because the cortisol is just flooding their system. So if you actually choose your words carefully and give feedback positively and interact with people positively, then you're avoiding these cortisol spikes, but you're actually promoting oxytocin because you're building trust. And if you think about that in terms of sales situations, people buy from people. It's all about trust and relationships. So really thinking about how you choose your words and your body language and the way that you interact with people can actually have a real impact on that relationship that you build. So when you look at it that way, happiness is actually such a wide-reaching field, because all of these things affect happiness, but they affect how you function in life, and that's how I think of happiness. It absolutely underpins everything that we do, from our personal lives to our professional lives to how we handle stress, etc.
Yeah, definitely. I had a situation today. Well, the sun was shining. Like you were saying before, I looked really nice. I was off to my meeting. I had put a favourite song of mine from when I was 17 on this morning, dancing away. And the whole situation, how the meeting went, how everything went, was perfect. I couldn't ask for it any better. But I think it's because I set that up. And I know you mentioned your gratitude journal. You do it on a morning. I seem to do mine on a night before I go to bed, and just set myself up, for a nice sleep, and nice in the morning. And sometimes actually I do journal in the morning. If I, it's just giving myself that extra 15 minutes waking up that I'll need to get every single thing that you said out of my head, get myself clear. If there's anything that's stuck in there or anything that I know I need to focus on, just getting it out and writing about it. Sometimes just to dump it, so it's a different way of not being grateful. What you were saying before, but just clear whatever's been blocking my way, because I think I want to start this day in a great way. I want to keep my day in a great way, because sometimes there's unexpected jolts in there, and I feel like that's my preparation to whatever's going to come my way through the day. Is that the best way for me to be able to deal with it?
And that's really good, and I think that's part of acknowledging as well that, as we were saying earlier, not everything will always go your way, and I think if you try and mask that, then it will affect your day, because it'll be niggling away. So I think it's a really good idea what you do, to just kind of write it down, get it out of the way. It's almost like, right, it's out of my brain and on paper now, so I can put it to one side, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. So if you want to show us your book one more time, Frederika, because I'm quite conscious we've been on for...
I've been yakking for a while.
We're at about 40 minutes now. And if you can tell us, where we can get more of you or see more of you or hear more of you, and what's the best way to get your book as well, or if you run any workshops, whatever you want on there.
Okay, well, the book is Recipe for Happiness, and the best way to get it so that you can get every format you want is if you go to recipe-for-happiness.co.uk. Then you'll find the links to Amazon, to Oodle Books where the paperback is, and also to Google Play. So if you like to use your Android phone to read, you can do that as well. In terms of where I'm speaking next, I'm actually doing Recipe for Happiness as a very much, rather than the business focused talk, very much about just well-being and emotional well-being at the Yes Group in Nottingham on the 10th of July. So that's going to be an evening, and if you just look up Yes Group Nottingham, then all the details are on there for people to get the tickets. And other than that, my website is happiness-speaker.co.uk, so you can find all my details, all my social media and everything on there as well.
Oh, thank you very much, Frederika. I know your time is very important, and thank you for sharing it with us today.
Oh, thank you very much as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Take care and have a great evening.
And you. Bye.